My name is Rob Brosnan, and I'm currently the chairman this year. I'm really excited about this discussion we're going to have today with Pat O'Donnell from Leading Edge. So I'd just like to give you a little bit of a background to Pat. Pat is the Director of Operational Excellence with Leading Edge, qualified from UCG as an industrial engineer, like myself, and has a variety of work experience with Intel on the Fab 14, working with capacity and capital roles. Pat's also worked in Australia and worked as a senior lean consultant with Leading Edge. He has worked in a variety of industries from the private sector uh, through supply chain, services industry, and delivers a lot of training programs as well. And I was lucky to be on one of his many years ago with Dairy Gold. And Pat really has a passion for lean and problem solving, and that's going to be very evident in the next few minutes. So just before I pass over to Pat, just like to ask people keep in mind of housekeeping and time. Dr. Kira Lavelle from MTU is going to be our chat moderator. So we would hope to have about 15 minutes discussion from Pat. Please feel free to add in questions. Everyone stay on mute. Other final thing is this session is being recorded and will be kept in our archives with the Southwest Lean Forum as well. So I will now hand you over to Pat. So thanks very much and welcome, Pat.
Thanks, Rob. It's great to have the opportunity to speak today, and we get a very good attendance as well. So I'm going to bring you through problem solving, and really what I want to do is bring you through a couple of the different elements that we have found important, very important from a problem solving perspective when it's applied across a variety of different industries and different services. So traditional, I guess when you look at the traditional problem solving, obviously has its background is a heavy focus in manufacturing, but we have applied it across the board, and it's really to get a kind of a feel for what do we feel are the key elements as regards to problem solving there. So we flick on to the next one. So just a little bit about Leading Edge. We are headquartered in Ireland, but we've also got operations in Canada and Australia. And we're in existence for 25 years, in excess of 25 years at this stage. And we're a leader in the provision of business transformation, management consulting, change management, strategy deployment, business and operational improvements, and across the board, across a number of different sectors. So we would have started in supply chain, very heavy in supply chain, where we still have a lot of expertise today, and then in manufacturing. And as we applied lean thinking across the various different industries, we've seen that lean thinking migrate across from its traditional, if you like, home as regards supply chain and manufacturing, across to services, across to banking, and onto healthcare, and a lot into services as well. So we'll flick on to the next. So first slide. First thing that that I would put up here is regards to our traditional fishbone diagram. So fishbone diagram, so called because in terms of the shape it takes as regards the fish itself, but in terms of it's called a number of different things. It's the fishbone. It's also known as an Ishikawa diagram, 6 M's, 6 P's, and the cause and effect. And the purpose of this, really, the strength of this is giving the teams, and it's the first thing as regards being able to give your problem-solving teams a tool, a focus, and a methodology to really approach a problem in a systematic way, so that when we start to define what the problem is, and we'll get into that in the next slide as regards proper definition of what the problem is, that the team has a structure that they can work around. Quite recently, in the last couple of years, this has begun to become more and more popular again in service type industries, and typically the problems that we see with problems is that we jump into the solutions, and the focus of the tool is a very simple tool that will cover off a number of different, or the main sections that you would look at as regards what is the possible effects that are to contribute to the problem. Is it on the person side, the man side? Is it the machine that we talk about? Is it Mother Nature, the environment of where the problem is happening? The measurement, how do we measure? Is that's what is causing the issue? the materials that are used, and the method. By giving a team a tool like this for problem solving, what you get them to do is they have the problem there, but they use this tool to systematically approach the problem and to evaluate the number of different effects or the number of different effects that could cause that problem. And it's not to say, and it's one of the key things we get across to the teams when we're applying the tools, is that you don't have to, or there may not be a number of different issues on each of these, if you like, the sections of the problem itself. So in other words, when we look at the people, is it the people that are contributing to the problem? We've got to delve into that. It may not be, okay? So there may be a lot of issues there as regards how we approach this, lack of training, etc. One good example that we had on this quite recently is that we were looking at this in a customer service example, and one of the metrics that was being used for the calls was the length of the call. So one of the language teams was perceived to have a problem in the sense that the length of the call was longer than the other language teams. When we delved into this in a little bit more detail, what we found out is, as we went through each of the different elements and the team contributed to each of those different elements, as we started to identify, well, there was no difference in the approach as regards the team itself. There was no difference in the technology the team were using. There was no difference in terms of the environment. But what we did figure out is that one of the products or materials, if you like, that fed into that is the type of call that this particular language team took was a lot more complex. So really what we weren't doing is comparing apples with apples. And what that did was it allowed the entire organization to go back and to normalize how they measured the call type. So not just on the length of the call, but the complexity that was in that call. So the one simple problem that we had there uncovered a lot more opportunity for the wider organization. And we were able to use that then as a benchmarking so that we could apply a benchmarking tool across the complexity of call. The real power of this is that by giving the team a tool, you have a systematic tool and we follow that system through. And that in itself kind of really lends itself to putting in a strong basis for problem solving. So we just go to the next one, Rob.
Yep.
The next thing is we have a tool, I think is very important, as we look at the approach that we have for that tool. Now, there's a number of different approaches that you would see here as regards problem solving approaches and improving methodologies that you'd be familiar with through Lean, Plan, Do, Check, Act, or to make. And really in terms of that, when you look at the problem itself, when we are looking at a problem solving session, most of the time has to going into clearly defining what the problem is. We may have a perception of what the problem is, but we need to clearly define what that problem. I think it was Steve Jobs that says that if you define the problem correctly, you most always have the solution. And I think that in itself is very, very powerful. So when you look at a problem solving exercise like this, it's time, it pays for itself to take a step back, clearly define what the problem is, and then start to approach it. So the initial problem, if it's unclear or not defined, we've got to clarify what that problem is. Where did it happen? How does it happen? Does it happen often? What's the frequency? What's the effect of that problem, etc. And then to break the problem down, because we may come and it's really a trap that sometimes we fall into, is that we come with this overarching problem, right? That would require a lot of effort across the board. The best way to do it is to take that problem, break it down into something that's discrete, and then to start to solve those different elements. Set the goal. The next step is, what do we want to achieve? And this brings ourselves into our improvement cycle, either into Make or Plan, Do, Check, Act. Is what is the goal we want to achieve? When do we want to achieve it by? Set smart targets for that improvement in the problem itself, and then get down to root cause analysis. And how you get down to root cause analysis is using traditional tools like the 5 whys, but also going back to the previous slide, as regards the fishbone diagram. So you can start to look at it very systematically as regards what's the root cause for that particular problem. Now, we may not have one. There may be a number of different issues that contribute to it, and that's an important learning aspect as well from the team. As the team will be able to look at it in a systematic way and uncover it for themselves. And I think that's really important too, is to empower the problem solving teams that you have with the proper tools, the proper training, and have a system and approach that they can follow, and they can learn more about the process themselves. Developing the countermeasures. So what are the things that we're going to do, which is important, not just talk about the problems. What are the things we're going to have to do, to implement, to lessen or to eliminate the problem, to measure those. And we're going to get into this in the next slide as regards what is the effect of those countermeasures that we have. Have they have the amount of effect on the problem that we thought? And if they didn't have, what have we learned from that? And that's a key element as well as regards the setting the tone for the problem solving team. Provide them with the training, provide them with the tools, provide them with an approach. But then it'll be going on to my next slide in terms of setting the scene or setting the environment for that problem solving team. The most, I guess, satisfying efforts that we have is, or that I feel through problem solving, regardless of what area you look at, is when the team themselves start to uncover the problems, but as well as that, take on the tools and take on that training, that skill set themselves, and really take off and fly with it. So you're not looking over their shoulder, you're not managing it the whole time. The team take the tools, take the approach, and then really go on and execute and get fantastic savings. The last one then is, once we have implemented something new, is to standardize. And this is a key thing to make sure that we don't slip back down the line, so that it's not an improvement for just a once off or just one period of time. Is that what we do is that when we have an improvement, we've improved the countermeasures, we know what works, we know how we can lessen or eliminate the problem, standardize that process so it becomes the standard across the teams. And once you have that, then you have the basis for proper problem solving, but as well as that start of a continuous improvement cycle. And of course, this goes back again in terms of where is the next problem, how can we further improve, what are the other issues that we can chase down through the problem solving framework. Okay, Rob, next slide. We've talked about, oh yeah, before we get into that, there's one thing that we're very keen on, right? He's like your dollar bill, in God we trust, but everyone else must bring data. And that's really important in terms of, we have a perception of how big a problem is, we have a perception of what causes an effect on a problem, but we must quantify that. So to make sure that before you go off on your countermeasures, that you're targeted at the right countermeasures. Again, we have a perception of what the problem will be. We have a perception of how big or the effect that it will have, but we must bring data, and you must build that into your approach, into your framework, so that the team is focused on the right thing. So that the big things are the big things. It's like the saying is, the big thing is always the big thing. We'll prove it's the big thing. So if we can bring the data behind that, and you get the team that are focused on, even before they go off on the journey, to make sure that they're focused on the right element, the right process, the right part of the process to improve, we can back it up with data. We agree, we go off, we implement the countermeasures, we measure. Did we improve? Did we improve by as much as we expected to improve? If not, what did we learn about that process? Not that it's a failure, but what did we learn about that process? Did we learn something that we didn't know before we started that off? Okay, the next slide. We talked about a tools and approach, and I think one of the just as important, and I touched on this previous here, is that we set the mindset, and we set the mindset for the team. And this goes for not just problem solving. And if you think about even the term problem solving, we're starting off with something that has a negative connotation, problem, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to improve. And I think what we owe it to the teams that we manage, that we are mentoring, that we are working with, that when we set off on a journey like this, and it's an improvement journey, we call it continuous improvement, and then we've got problem solving. So you've got, if you like, a positive and a negative as regards, we have a problem, but we also have an opportunity. Toyota you'll often see this term that we don't see problems, we see opportunities. And it's the contribution of how everybody that works on a particular project can contribute to make it better. And the another saying is, I never lose, I either win or I learn. Again, comes in once we start to put in an improvement, okay, and it has an effect. We may perceive it before we put in that improvement that it's going to have a big effect. Now, if it doesn't have a big effect, what have we learned from that? Okay, maybe we've learned something about the process and we build that back in. So we've learned something more about our process that we can build it back into our improvement cycle. Setting the scene and the mindset for the problem solving team is very important, because when you go and you kick off the team in the first place, you're going to be involved with people that are working on that process every single day. my natural response to a situation like that is that I'd be seen to be doing something wrong, or there's something wrong with the way I do my everyday work. And we've got to manage that, and we've got to really involve the people that are working in the Gemba, working on this process day in, day out. And how do you get them on side? How do you involve them in the process itself? So what are the opportunities we have to improve that? And that's key for longer term continuous improvement projects, to make sure that you've got the team involved in the process itself. So it's not seen as someone coming in, parachuting in, looking at a particular area, looking at there's problems in this area, there's opportunities in this area. How do we involve the people? Because if we want a continuous improvement cycle, we've got to set up just as much as training the team and the approach and the tools, we have to have the culture around how do we approach problems? How do we approach opportunities? Let it be seen as a positive, so that we can move on and you can really gain people, because that's how you instill a continuous improvement culture within an organization. Okay, so the next slide. I'm just conscious of time here. So creating the environment is what I talked about here, is set the tone for the team. It's an opportunity to improve and also to contribute. That's really important. And I think taking people along on the journey as regards to continuous improvement and problem solving is very, 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 very important. And your natural response to something when it's a problem in your particular area is you'll feel defensive. And we have to try and break that down. We have to involve people and see the positive of this exercise. Value everyone's input, set the team up for success, and train and support them so that they have training within the tools and the approach, and they have a systematic way that they can look at particular opportunities and problems within their area, and they can look at solutions to improve that. It's not just a once-off, so it's embedded as part of the team. Where this is really successful, and again, where you can set it up that it's part of the every day, every week, every month work, where people are looking at this, they're going through a problem-solving session, they see it as a learning exercise and an improvement exercise, and that's where you get the continuous improvement and you get the ideas. And it's an opportunity, as I said, rather than a problem. So setting that, even that tone, that mindset is very important. Sometimes we look at it as well when you look at something like a value stream mapping exercise. In my experience, some of the worst things you can do is you can say is look how much waste is in the process itself. Okay, there may be waste in the process, but the worst thing you can do is you can say, okay, look how bad this is. Flip it on its head. Take it from an opportunity where something went really, really well, very, very efficient. How can we do more of that? And you set people's brains thinking in a slightly different manner, and you really get people on board. Next slide. So the key takeaways, problem solving recap, and then we'll hand it over some questions. I know, Rob, you have some questions as well, and we'll take them. Some questions come through in chat as well. Use the appropriate tool. That's key. And train your teams in the appropriate tools to use for this. The Fishbone is a great approach because it's systematic. Be systematic in the approach to it. Think about the mindset. Think about the culture, and make it part of the job. The other parts is not just for products, this is just as much for services. So again, we've used this in customer services, we've used this in banking and insurance, a lot in healthcare systems and in patient care. And there is no fail, there's a win or a learn. So in terms of this, you either win and you improve the project, or you learn about it and then you subsequently improve the project. And the last part, and it's something that we should really instill in this as well, is have fun as much as possible. So learn about it, have fun, make it something that people want to be involved in, and then you can really kind of tap into that, to the knowledge, to the experience, and to the expertise that you have within your organization. Okay. Whistle stop tour. Rob, have you any questions?
Yes. Thanks very much, Pat. I'm just trying to. I just might leave that open there a minute. I'll go back to the screen just to see the other people that are on the call here. I like the idea of have fun. You reminded me recently we were doing a 5 why, and somebody said it's really called a 5 who. But it's about understanding the process, as you said. We recently did a value stream map here, and what we actually said was lifting up the bonnet of the car, so to speak, and understanding what's under the hood.
Yeah.
A problem, you don't always get the root cause, but everyone gets a a far better understanding of the process.
And I think in terms of a value stream mapping exercise like that, or a problem solving exercise, right? You're using an appropriate tool to that, but it can be quite raw, because you're looking at, you know, a job you're doing every single day of the week, and no one wants to be told of, well, look how bad it is, right? Or look how big the problem is, right? But what we're great at is we're great at working around problems and not giving ourselves the time to take a step back, take stock, identify where we can do it better, and then remove that issue so that we save in the longer term. So, you know, it can be quite raw. And I think as well that the having fun part is where can you can you really kind of build this in, that it's something that people actually enjoy. And part of that, as well as answering the what's in it for me question, is, you know, where can we get the wins for everybody? So, you know, if you're working on a problem, and you're working in day out, and you're removing something that's a headache to you, okay, that's something that'll pique my attention.
Thanks, Pat. I just want to open up there. Have any other questions come in? Would anyone like to raise a question to Pat?
There's a question just after coming in there in the chat box, Rob, and Gillian Campbell. Gillian, do you want to ask Pat the question?
Sure, I'd love to. I'm actually calling from Canada, and we're just in the beginner stages of saying to ourselves, our budget is lean, but our processes are not. And I'm calling from a municipality of about 100,000 people. And so what we're looking to do is now look at, are there more efficient and effective ways to do things? But we also don't have, well, we have very little measures. Most of them are metrics, if anything at all. So my question is, we know we want to do better. How long would you collect those initial measures for to establish your baseline before you would start to dive in and look at your processes, your total lead time, your non-value add pieces, before then developing, you know, the before and after picture, right?
Yep. And I think that's a really good question, is regards how much data is enough, and in terms of what you go after. And I think if you have your metrics and they're over a period of time, I would collect and continue to collect, and then ask yourself the question, is that representative of your process? So maybe you have something that's, if we look at lean and you want to make directional improvements, right, as regards, we know we can get better. Well, one of the things to be able to do is identify where you offer the value, and what does better mean, or what does that metric look like. So there may be enough information for you to know that you've collected already, that this is a particular area we should focus on. And then really at that point is how much other information do you need to collect on some of your metrics for you to really go to be able to decide that this is the right area to go after. So it's kind of, without knowing the metrics itself, what I would say is, using your experience, have you collected enough already to be able to go after that particular area? Does that make sense to you as the expert or the business owner within that area?
Thank you very much.
No problem. No problem. I think there was another question as well, I think we had before, Rob, as regards where should the problem solving be done? Should it be done, you know, on the floor, or, you know, should it be done in a boardroom, a meeting room, etc.? I would say
online.
Online. Exactly. Yeah. And again, it depends on the process. If you've got a manufacturing process, I would always advocate that you go and find out where it's done. We've done it before in healthcare settings, when we've done it in anterooms off operating theaters or nurses' stations, etc., where, you know, that information is out of public sight, but is very accessible to the nurses and doctors who you can't take off the floor for a period of time. Having said that, the pandemic has necessitated that we move online, and we've held a number of different problem-solving training sessions, and also problem-solving sessions online itself. And that can be quite useful as well, in the sense that it requires a little bit more organization. You may have to collect some information in advance. You may have to split those sessions up, but there's no reason they can't work. And as well as that, if you're working cross time zones or cross sites, they can work quite well together. Requires a little bit more, but access to it works just as well.
Great.
I think there's a question there from Barry.
Yeah, from Russell Barry.
Yeah. Do you find tools more effective than other in terms of time and resources required to reach the goal? Is to make more effective than the PDCA? Very good question. What I would suggest there, or my observation there is, obviously you have more detail around DMAIC, and that DMAIC and Plan, Do, Check, Act are appropriate where you are on your lean journey. I think Plan, Do, Check, Act is, if you haven't got an organization that's very mature in problem solving, in approaches to continuous improvement, or in terms of lean, that's a great tool to start off with. I think in some other, when you look at, highly repetitive manufacturing processes where there's a lot of data, and there's the, if you like, there's the expertise on site to be able to spend more time in that and more experience in that, DMAIC then is more appropriate in those particular areas. But as a starting point, PDCA is a great way to start.
Thanks, Pat. We just have one other attendee with their hands up. Paul Malloy, do you have a question?
How you doing, Pat? Thanks for today, Pat. Pat, just to take you back to one thing there, you were saying about the problem solving in terms of teams and the compositions of teams. I come from a sales background, and one of the things that I've noticed is that sales tends to be at the end of the chain, and production and other teams tend to make decisions sometimes without an input from sales, which can have a detrimental effect on it. I'll give you an example. Production decided to change the format or size of one of the products. The product was in a size that fit perfectly on most shelves within a shop. They felt they needed to change and make the bottle longer and narrower. There was no consultation with sales, and it ended up that in 70% or 80% of the stores, the product didn't fit on the shelf. And right. Compositely, then we lost sales. And it's just something that when you're talking about teams, it's probably really important in essence to have the composition of the team from various backgrounds, because if it's a production-led team without a sales input, you're going to have a situation like that where it's going to miss that trick. Where if there's somebody from a sales background, being involved, or else someone from a production end, and going out into the trade and engaging with sales, it's a key link. And I just wanted to know your thoughts on the actual compositions of problem-solving teams.
Absolutely, we talked about it as whether the problem solving and even improvement teams, they've got to you've got to have the view from the entire value stream, and the entire, let's take it in your example as regards the entire product life cycle, because that's a key thing as regards shelf space. In that retail is gold dust, right?
Yeah.
And this could make the difference of you being in a premium spot or not being in a premium spot. The composition of the teams, whenever you look at it as regards problem solving, definitely in problem solving and value stream mapping as well, is you involve people the entire way through the value stream, so from beginning to end, and that's key. So the composition of the teams has to involve that cross function, and as well as that, what's always good is to throw someone into the problem solving team that has no experience in the value stream, because they're an outside set of eyes.
Yeah.
So that could be an outside consultant. I ask stupid questions all the time, and someone gladly pays me to do that. But if you get someone with an outside perspective as well, they can maybe challenge some of the things that we take for granted. So when you look at the team, absolutely has to be cross-functional, has to be at all steps in the process, or understands all steps in the process and give perspective in all steps in the process. And as well as that, an outside set of eyes is always good.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Liam.
Thanks, Barry. It's Fred. It also sounds like in that particular instance, there was an opportunity to pull in some customers to get their input, and that obviously didn't happen, right? There was no voice of the customer in that entire decision making, by the sounds of it. So
yeah,
that would have been key, right?
That would have definitely helped, but I think the customer in conjunction with the sales person would have seen that. Look, if you change the dimensions of this product, it's set on a particular shelf, and the shelves have different depths and heights. If you take it off it, you're now pushing it onto a different higher margin shelf, and then you're going to sacrifice one thing for another. You're going to lose on a trade-off, and you're right. I think having just the one thing that I've kind of learned from my experiences with problem solving is, and I think Pat touched on it there, is having someone just to come in with a different set of eyes, or making sure that every link in the chain is incorporated in it. You'll get a better result and easier to standardize then in the long run.
Well, I think something like, and I know it's outside of the scope, but the SIPOC diagram may have identify, the customer's inputs and things like that. So anyways, that's a little bit out of the scope, but to Pat's point, all the key players weren't part of the decision making. I think that was the area there.
So I'm just conscious of time here because we did try to finish for 2. So really interesting discussion, and I think it's well worth having again maybe at some time. Pat,
Sure.
we'd love to have you back. Fantastic insights, and thank you very much for presenting to giving us today, and thanks very much to Dr. Ciara Lavelle as well for organising today. Superb job with great attendance and well done. So we hope to visit this again, and anyone interested in becoming involved with the Southwest Lean Forum, it's the southwestleanforum@gmail.com or LinkedIn. And again, as last mentioned, thanks to Joe and his team in Leading Edge for a great presentation today. Thanks again, Pat.
Thanks for the time, guys. Lovely to meet you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Wish
Pat.
you all
Thank you.
a good afternoon.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Take care.